All right, so something that I'm excited about is to start a video series going through this awesome ESL Grammar book. We used it for one of my classes a semester or two ago, and it's really great. So it's called Keys to Teaching Grammar to English Language Learners, Practical Handbook, very practical, by Keith Folse. And so we're just going to be going through some of the highlights of this book, which is practically everything. One, based on questions from volunteers I get, as it's my role to be training some of our volunteers. They come with great questions because our students come up with great questions. But also, second reason, a lot of our higher level students that I've been working with have been, there have been comments that are like, I need to know the grammar rules. And so just to be at that level to ask about the rules of language specifically and explicitly, like explain the rules to me in like linguistic terms, I think that's really great. So I will try to keep in mind those two audiences as I go through this series. It is more of a back burner series, I will admit, just because there are some other lower literacy videos I'm working on, as well as just other roles. So anyway, so what I want to go over is just the intro of the book, what's covered in it, and then what else we'll cover in these grammar series. So first, and maybe most importantly, we'll see, just realizing the difference between goals, how students set goals, and then errors that students make. So first is prescriptive versus descriptive grammar. Prescriptive, if you think of, you get a prescription at the pharmacy, you prescribe something. If something is, if you look at that base word script, if you get a script off a movie, it's already written down, so you know what you're going to say. It's set. A script is set. So if it is preset, prescripted. So prescriptive grammar, then, as you can imagine, is the rules. So like, well, the rules say you have to have, oh, this is embarrassing. What's a rule off the top of my head? I thought of the I before E except after C, but there are so many exceptions to that rule. So prescriptive, you can't use a double negative. But you hear that in common speech all the time. And so what descriptive grammar tries to do then is just describe what goes on. Like, there are exceptions. There are patterns in informal or common speech, and this is why they happen. Maybe they try to describe patterns that they see versus trying to make learners adhere to prescribed patterns. Neither is necessarily better than the other. I personally believe descriptive grammar, taking a more descriptive approach, is less of a headache in the long run. I used to be a bit of a grammar Nazi, if you can't tell by how excited I am to make these videos. But I also have since leaned off of the legalism when it comes to grammar. It's good to know the prescribed rules, and then it helps you better understand why native speakers, like, why do native speakers say this? It's obviously not what we learned in class. So there's a long section at the end of the book that goes through common questions of like, hey, I heard this at my job from a native English speaker. Why do they not care if they're wrong? Etc. So that's prescriptive versus descriptive. So when do mistakes actually matter? We want to try and balance prestige. Like, if you say ain't, my mom always said people are going to look down on you and think you're uneducated. Like, ain't a word and you ain't gonna use it, is what she said. So ain't is slang, not slang, but it's like improper grammar for is not. I ain't gonna do that, I'm not going to do that. Versus intelligibility. So people generally know if I say, I ain't gonna do that, they know I mean I'm not going to say it. So there's prestige versus intelligibility. A descriptive grammar approach might be a bit more utilitarian, of like, well, as long as they can tell what I mean, as long as what I say is intelligible, able to be comprehended, then it's not a big deal. Versus, yeah, so just balancing these factors, excuse me. So eradicating or getting rid of zero errors. Zero errors should not be our number 1 goal. Unless, of course, that is your student's goal or your goal as an advanced learner, then by all means hold yourself to that standard. But as a facilitator, and again, you're free to disagree with me. This is a recorded video, so I probably won't know if you disagree with me. Anyways, helping students, giving them a foundation in the basic rules of grammar, so they can eventually learn to limit their own mistakes and recognize their own mistakes, and then also have the tools and research to, tools and resources to research their own mistakes. So goals and errors. Students do not learn and progress in a linear manner. So we call this interlanguage. So one day they really get it. It clicks like, oh, this is how you form past tense negation with the question. But then the next day or the next week, it doesn't come out as smoothly, or they keep mixing up this or that. That's not backtracking. They didn't most likely didn't get hit in the head and forget something. It's just a natural pace of language learning. So there's ups and downs, but generally we should see a trend upward. So I don't know if my video is backwards, upward that way. So consistency and patience are required for improvement. I'm not sure why I have a picture of peanut butter and jelly, maybe because of consistency. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I originally presented this a couple months ago. So learn to notice student attempts and what they produce and where those mistakes may be rooted. So this puts a lot of responsibility on you as a facilitator, or even yourself as a learner. The self-awareness, I believe, may even be harder as you're trying to process and produce language according to this prescribed set of rules. Noticing what you naturally want to try and produce, what language you naturally want to try and produce, or what mistakes your students tend to make if you are a facilitator. So being aware that true errors and informal language are different. So if a student always just pronounces gonna, I'm gonna do this, I wanna do that, you may consider that a true error if you are more of a prescriptivist, versus you may think that's fine. And as long as your students know the difference between gonna and wanna are informal language, and as long as your students know that, that might be a descriptive grammar, a descriptive grammar approach. There we go. So it's not uncommon for students to bring terminology and concepts to class from social media, or something they've heard, in the workplace or seen in a meme. So I have this little infographic of current, contemporary, modern slang. So I don't think I could tell you all of these, what they mean. Obviously, they have the dictionary or prescribed meaning, extra, you have more than you need, versus, or shook, I shook the jar of marbles. Or, we try to speak in facts when someone asks for information, versus if you add the slang spin to it, obviously there's different connotations, and so it can be fun trying to keep up with them, and there's different layers of humor, which is also a very interesting topic, humor and language, and especially shifting into second language and humor and how that works. So maybe I should do a presentation on puns. Anyways, moving on. Native speaker versus ESL grammar. So native speakers, we as native speakers of English make certain grammar mistakes that English language learners, or ELLs, may not make. They actually probably don't make them. And so part of the responsibility of a facilitator is to at least be aware of the difference in errors and why students make them. That doesn't mean you have to become a syntactical expert on every one of an expert in syntax and grammar for every one of your students' home languages. That would be impressive for sure. And if you do that, let me know, because I could probably learn a lot from you. But what that does mean is at least knowing, hey, this language is usually different in adjective order, or this language is different in how they add suffixes and prefixes. And so being able to explain, well, this is the function of language that is different in English versus your home language. And so if you can think about it in terms of more explicit juxtaposition, in terms of more direct comparison, I should say. So So some errors occur from the target language, which is what we just said, and then some mistakes are just normal in second language acquisition or any language acquisition. So an example I always like from first language acquisition, so think of babies learning their first language. In English, we have the regular past tense ed form, right? And so babies or toddlers, as they're beginning to speak, may be able to say, oh, we went to the park yesterday, or, we went to park, because they probably wouldn't use full sentences. That might be a bit weird. And then all of a sudden, a few months later, your toddler said, we goed to the park. Junior, you used to use the word went so well. But they're like, no, we goed. They're adding that ed ending to the go to form they're trying to regularize the past tense of the verb to go. And so you can correct them and say, no, it's went, even though they know how to use the word went. It's just not, they will not produce the form went because they have learned that rule of ed and they're over applying it. So that's actually progress because they're learning how to apply the rules consistently, and then later they learn about the exceptions. So that should kind of sound a bit familiar with the prescriptive, descriptive. If you learn the prescribed rules, then you can eventually learn when they're broken and how without being too shook, if I can use the slang here. So I thought it was funny. I hope you're laughing. Yeah, so cool script down here. And I think this is the last bit just from the introduction. Examples of native speaker versus English language learner mistakes. I am from Philippines. As a native English speaker, I wouldn't naturally make this mistake because there's a somewhat unspoken rule of if the country sounds like a plural, then it's I am from the Philippines, I am from the United States, I am from the United Kingdom, versus you don't say I'm from the Canada. So that's the rule there. She paints very beautiful. This is for adverbs. So as you can see, I won't tell you all the answers. That's probably not as fun, but I will read through all of them. And then as I read through, your job is just to think, this is more for native speakers who have a better set and knowledge of negative examples, of non-examples in English. So, excuse me. So more people should have signed up by now. This is the third one. My brother, he is a good student. All the students' tests are done. I have hungry. We avoid to pay extra. The heat doesn't affect me much. So all of these are wrong, I am sorry to say. We did go over the first two. So the ESL mistakes are in green. The native speaker mistakes, this is all tendencies, of course, if you make these mistakes as an ESL student or a native speaker and it doesn't line up with the color. Don't worry, I'm a descriptivist, I won't judge you. So, so she paints very beautiful, again, adverbs beautifully. More people should have signed up by now. This is a native speaker mistake. It comes from the quick speech of should have. They should have signed up, but you hear should have. Like have, the dominant sound is the V, so you usually just turns into should have, I shoulda. Or even just S-H-O-U-D-A, shoulda. I should have done this, you should have done that. Quick speech, informal speech. It's along the lines of gonna, wanna, shoulda. Okay, my brother, he is a good student. This is called reduplicated subject, or maybe not. That's too big of a word. So I believe in certain languages such as Arabic, you repeat the subject. So you have the subject and then you repeat the pronoun and then you can move on to the verbs. So my brother, he is a good student. Versus in English, we just need one or the other. Having both is a bit redundant. So my brother is a good student or he is a good student. The referent or the subject is still the brother of the speaker, but we don't need to double whammy it, if that makes sense. So all of the students' tests are done. This is a native speaker mistake with the plural possessive form, always tricky. We have a separate slide on that later, but there's an apostrophe that needs to go in, well, it needs to go somewhere, and sometimes native speakers don't know where to put it, sometimes they don't put it at all, but because we're talking about something that the students possess in a way, their tests, the apostrophe would go at the end of the word students after the last S. So all the students, that's how we know it's many students, a group of students. So the apostrophe goes after that last S. So, then I have hungry, it's just a common phrase, and I know French and Spanish you say this, Chinese you don't, those are the only languages I have more of a knowledge of. But in English we say I am hungry, I am 12, I am 26, so not I have 26 years. Good. We avoid to pay extra. This is an ESL mistake having to do with the with verbs and infinitives, and participles. So we have the infinitive form of to pay extra. We do not need the word to, which makes it the infinitive. We just need this participle. We avoid, and then we form it into present tense. We add the ing ending, so avoid paying. So it's not avoid to paying, not avoid to pay. It's just avoid paying extra. Yeah, and then the heat doesn't affect me much. This is a native speaker mistake. It is the heat doesn't affect me much. Affect. So, and then the next series in this just basics introduction portion is So this is on Google Slides, and this was downloaded from Google Slides from my work computer, so some of the formatting is messed up. This is kind of embarrassing, but we're just going to be going over the parts of speech in English and then comparison of what they look like in the world's most populous other languages. So a great part of Folse's book is, as he goes over these parts of speech, he has, common errors in Russian, common errors in Chinese, common errors in so a bunch of other languages. And I'm trying to page to an example of this. So if you can see, we have where's my camera? So there's just these charts at the end of the chapters. It has great lists of these things. So I'll try to work those into these presentations. And so as you can see, this is the basics. I still have to fill in a lot of these slides, and then we'll go into a series on the actual grammar keys that he talks about. It's good to understand these as a facilitator. So it's a deep dive into the structure of English, lots of slides. And then we also have, this is one I've already done, this is the 20 kind of frequently asked questions. That's hard to say. So we call this the FAQ, or frequently asked questions. And so we have about 20 of those to go through with examples. And then lastly, we have the tips and techniques for teaching. And as you can imagine, that is geared much more towards facilitators. So I hope you are as excited about grammar as I am. And I hope you will stick with me through more of these presentations. And now my dog wants to be let inside. So this is a great time to wrap it up.